Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. Welcome back. So we're back for one share, and then tomorrow I'm away again. But that's that time of year. So we next week I think we should be back in usual schedule. Okay, let's pick up from the Mishnah. We got up to Daf Hey and with Bet, the Mishnah at the bottom. And we're talking about the din of a Bechor. We saw there's an interesting machloket here between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon regarding what happens. Just a reminder, Bechor, we're dealing with essentially Bechor of a Be'emat Torah. The din of a Bechor is that you're not allowed to eat it. It has to be brought to the Beit HaMikdash, to be brought as a korban, unless it has a mum. If it has a mum kavua, so then you can eat it outside, and then you can, etc. So the unlike other animals, which on Yom Tov would not be muktzar at all. You'd be allowed to do shchita if you designated to be eaten. So a bechor, if it does not have a mum, you cannot designate it to be eaten. It's going to be muktzar on Yom Tov, but there may be other issues as well. So the Mishnah says bechor shenafal lebol. Rabbi Yehuda omer yeled mum chavile. Okay, we have a case of a bechor, a firstborn animal that falls into a pit. We have a number of Mishnayot to deal with bechor and animals falling into pits. Apparently, it was quite common. So can you go and get it up? Well, what can you do with that? Because it's going to be mukta seemingly, right? Rashi says, Bechor shnafal habol, bechol bizman hazeh nishchat b'lo mum, ibnei shekot shemu. Right, nowadays says a bechor cannot be you cannot do shchita on a bechor unless it has a mum because it's kodshim. Elav hu kadosh. Right, we mentioned this. Unlike other types of korbanot which have to be designated, a bechor is kadosh me'elav. It's has inherent kedusha, and therefore it's still it's still nowadays we still have that status. V'ashachto kshehu tam. Somebody who's going to kill a bechor, which is tam, which does not have a mum, outside of the Beit HaMikdash, it's going to be anush karet, very, very severe. So okay, we're worried now your animal, your bechor has fallen into the pit, you're worried it's going to die there. There's no food, whatever. Can't get out. So we say like this. Rabbi Yehuda says a mumche can go down and can see. Mumche, what does that mean? An expert. What kind of mumche are we talking about? He says Rashi, Bakiba mumin. Lavchin ben mum kavod le mum over. Just like today, certain things, you have a shaila. You come to the Rav, you show him the pot or the fork or the spoon. That was the milky spoon was in the meaty pot or whatever it is, right? So you bring your animal to the mumche. You bring your animal to the Rav. You say, I have a shaila. He has a mum. Is this a mum kavua or is this a mum over? That's going to be a big difference. If it's a mum kavua, if it's a permanent blemish, then it loses its status of kodshim. If it's going to be a mum over, then you just wait. You just wait until that mum passes, and then it'll be fine. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Yeled mumche vileh. Rabbi Yehuda says a mumche can go down into the pit and he can see. Okay, im yesh bo mum yalev yishchot, vim lav lo yishchot. If it has a mum, so then you can go. Right, meaning. Says Rabbi Yehuda, you can go on Yom Tov, go to the pit and check if this animal has a mum or not, and if you find that it has a mum, so okay, gesundheit, you can take it up and you can do the shechita. Gesundheit to you, not gesundheit to the animal, because you're going to kill it. But that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Im lav lo yishchot. If not, if there is no mum, obviously you can't check. Rabbi Shimon omer kol she'en mumon nikam v'od yom ein zeh min hamuchan. Rabbi Shimon says no. Rabbi Shimon says it's too late. He says, if you didn't see that there was a mum on Erev Yom Tov, you can't now on Yom Tov come along and say, oh, now it's got a mum. Now I'm going to shecht it. It's already not min hamuchan from before Yom Tov, and therefore that would be forbidden. So let's just see Rashi over here. Rashi says, Im yesh bo mum. First of all, in the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, he says, Kochach. Rabbi Yehuda muktzah itle. Okay, the whole thing is a little bit strange because remember, we have a machloket, the right trust between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon regarding muktzah. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who is more stringent regarding muktzah than Rabbi Shimon. So that's why Rashi says, I don't understand. The Mishnah, you said, Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says you can go and you can see the mum on Yom Tov, and if you find the mum, you can take out the animal and you can shecht it. Rabbi Shimon. So that's Rabbi Yehuda, the one who's meant to be stringent. But he says, okay, Rabbi Shimon is the one who's meant to be more lenient about muktzah. Says no. Says even if the mumcha comes along and sees that there's a mum on Yom Tov, the fact is you didn't set it aside beforehand, so therefore it's not mukhan, and therefore you can't. So that seems backwards, the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, and that's why Rashi tells us over here there's something more going on. It's not just about muktzah. So Rashi says like this: says Rabbi Yehuda muktzah itle ubamum anofer bo b'Yom Tov lo shali. Says Rabbi Yehuda is more stringent regarding muktzah, and therefore he holds that if the animal got the mum on Yom Tov, so then for sure it doesn't help that the mum is going to go and see it now. The fact is there was no mum before Yom Tov, so it's no good. You had not designated this animal for use on Yom Tov. And this is what it means to say, he says Rashi, what's the case that the Mishnah is talking about? It is that the Bechor, already before Yom Tov, it had a mum. And I knew that it had a mum. I hadn't yet gone to ask the Shaila, was it a mum kavod, was it a mum uver? I didn't manage to go. And now it fell into the bore on Yom Tov. Okay. So now, he says, Yared mum chavil emum. Now the mumcha can go down and you can check the mum that was there. Okay, we're going to see if the Gemara stays with this explanation. But this is the explanation for now. That you can go on Yom Tov and you can check what was already there. And if he finds that it's a mum kavod, he says, okay, since I already had in mind from yesterday, from before Yom Tov, that perhaps it's a mum kavod, and maybe I'm going to be able to check this animal, therefore there's no muktzah. That's how Rabbi Yehuda explains. Aval, we said Rabbi Shimon says, says Rashi, again, it's not that Rabbi Shimon is being more stringent about muktzah. Don't make the mistake. Rabbi Shimon, whenever we say Rabbi Shimon late le muktzah, we don't mean Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold by the concept of muktzah bichlal. There are cases where both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon would agree, but he doesn't hold by it in every case. Okay, in less cases. Rabbi, the difficulty on Rashi's Perush is that the language of the Mishnah says Enze mina mukhan sounds like muktzah. But Rashi is saying that's not really what Rabbi Shimon means over here. What Rabbi Shimon means, Enze mina mukhan, means that because you haven't gone to the mumcha, the animal is not fit to be used on Yom Tov. And if you now come along and say Metilo b'Yom Tov, so nireke mitakno, that's nireke mitaken. It looks like he is fixing it. Right? He's doing something which is forbidden on Yom Tov. Davaleke dan din degazul be mishum shvut. That would be an isul d'Rabbanan. V'achik kama ena tarato eter ve'eno mukhan lehechsha. Okay. So says the Gemara. So that's what we've seen. That's the machlokah between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda says you can bring the mumche to come along and see the mum, and then you can bring up the animal and shechter. Rabbi Shimon says you can't do that. We explained, according to Rashi, that both of them are talking about a case where actually the animal had the mum before Yom Tov. You just hadn't checked what kind of a mum that was, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's fine. And according to Rabbi Shimon, it's not, because having the mumcha check on Yom Tov, that would seem to be a problem. So says the Gemara, what actually is their machloket, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon over here? Especially if we say that it's not muktzah. So so you're going to say, are we going to say what we basically just said, which is that the machloket is about ro'in mumin, whether a mumcha can come and look at the mum on Yom Tov. Okay, if we're going to say that is their argument, in mumin kamiflege. And Rashi says over here, the havadai mishum muktzeh lo havetamayu. Right, you can't say that the machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is muktzeh. That doesn't make sense. The abcha shaminan lehu, because we know that they hold the opposite way, meaning Rabbi Shimon is the one who's lenient and Rabbi Yehuda is the one who is stringent about muktzeh. And here in our Mishnah, it's the opposite. So you have to say that it's because of Riyat Mum. Rabbi Shimon savar ein lo'in, kivan davalek yoshev v'dan din. Rabbi Shimon says this is similar to sitting and doing sitting in a din, which you cannot do on Yom Tov. So says the Gemara, The Rabbi Yehuda saval in mumim b'yom tov. Then let's say, okay, Rabbi Yehuda says you can see the mum on Yom Tov. Rabbi Shimon saval ein lo in mumim b'yom tov. And Rabbi Shimon says, no, you can't see the mum on Yom Tov. So if that's the case, if that's really what they were arguing about, so why do you have this whole, says the Gemara now, why do you have this whole case of falling into a bore? Just say about any animal, right? The Alma, just say that, can you see a mum on Yom Tov? Rabbi Yehuda says yes, and Rabbi Shimon says no. Right? Do you really need this case of the bechol that fell into a bore? Why are you making things complicated? You're making things so complicated. We have this case of the bechor and the bore and the muktzah and this and that, and we have to go to the point. We have to ask, what are they arguing about? Oh, actually, they must be arguing about whether you can see the mum on Yom Tov. Just say, Rabbi Shimon says you can't see mum on Yom Tov. Rabbi Yehuda says you can see mum on Yom Tov. Why do you bring me this case? So says the Gemara, I'll tell you why I'm bringing this case. Because if I just taught it Ba'alma, I wouldn't have known what the din is in this case. I would have thought that in this case of the board, the din is going to be different. It says, okay, what's the difference over here? The difference is that once the animal is fallen into the pit, we have an extra consideration, we have an extra factor, a factor of tsar b'alei chayim. So it's going to be a big question. Rambam Metzia has a whole long sugya about tsar b'alei chayim. We've discussed it in the past. We actually discussed it on Shavuot night last year, for those who remember, those who might have been awake. We spoke about the question of milking cows on Shabbat, if you remember. We spoke about milking cows in the modern state of Israel, very, very fascinating question of technology and of Hilchot Medina that comes up. And one of the parameters, one of the parts, the very important part of that discussion is whether you're allowed to milk cows because of Tsar Ba'alei Chayim. Now, we generally accept that Tsar Ba'alei Chayim is an Isur, the Oraita. That is why most Rishonim learn. And it's not completely clear cut in the Gemara, but that's why most poskim learn. And there's discussion in the Shulchan Aruch as well. Shulchan Aruch is also not completely clear cut, and some understand to be Doraita, some understand to be Dorabanan. But there is going to be a difference, I'll just say, between Tsar Ba'alei Chayim if we're dealing with an active versus passive, right? If it's Tsar Ba'alei Chayim v'sheiv v'al taseh, so then that may be different, that may be more lenient. In any event, once the animals fall into the pit, there is tsar ba'alei chayim. So I have more reason to want to take it out. I'm going to have more reason to allow, to permit it. So says the Gemara like this. If you hadn't told me this case, and you just said that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon have a machloket about seeing a mumin on Yom Tov, I would have said the following. Sal kadata chamina mishum tsar ba'alei chayim le'alim v'liskei. Kal Rabbi Yoshua. I would have said that in this case, okay, where the Bechor has fallen into the pit, I don't even need to bring somebody to have a look and see it. I can just go, I can do harama. Harama is a very, very hard word to translate. But when we say harama, is kind of like when you are taking advantage of legal loopholes. That's essentially what harama is. And I could go and I can take the animal out of the pit. Meaning what? Like Rabbi Yoshua. What does Rabbi Yoshua say? So Rabbi Yeshua, we're going to see a Mishnah later on, towards the end of the Masechet. What happens if you have an animal and its offspring that fall into a pit on Yom Tov? Now, you're allowed to take out the animal, assuming it's not a Bechor. So you're allowed to take out the animal because you could shecht it. That you're allowed to do on Yom Tov. By the way, we generally accept when it comes to Tsar Ba'alei Chayim refers to causing pain to the animal. It's not referred to killing the animal. There are many tshuvot which talk about this, talk about shchita is obviously permitted. We don't consider shchita to be a tsar ba'alei chayim. To make the animal endure unnecessary suffering before, okay, that's something else. I'm not getting into now, discussion that comes up every few years, and now the government wants to come along and ban shchita, and they want to say that it's more humane to the animal. I'm not getting into that, although there are good scientific evidence to refute that, arguments to refute that as well. But the most important argument is the halachic argument. The Torah said that this is the way that you can shecht an animal in order to eat it. Okay, so therefore it's permitted. But for example, euthanasia of pets is discussed in the poskim and generally accepted that would be permitted. What about hunting? The Rabbi Yehuda has a famous tshuva about hunting. Right? He's asked if somebody can go hunting for sport, hunting for game, and he has a very, very fascinating discussion. He says he says over there that at the end of the day, meikar hadin, according to the letter of the law, it would be permitted. He says that it's not considered tsar b'alei chayim because you're not making the animal suffer, but you're killing it. He talks about bal tashchit, so long as you're actually using the meat and the hides of the animal, etc. So he says, according to that, from the letter of the law, it would be permitted. However, he's very, very reticent against it. He says, essentially, his conclusion is, what kind of a profession for a nice Jewish boy is hunting? Right? He says, who do we know who are hunters in the Torah? We had Nimrod, we had Esav. You want to emulate the Nimrod and Esav. He says also there's a danger over there, which one may not enter into unnecessarily. Okay, so that's an interesting discussion. But so what we're saying over here, so Rabbi Yeshua says in the Mishnah as follows. So he said if you have the animal that falls into the pit, you can bring up the animal and you can shecht it, that's fine. What happens if an animal and its offspring both fall into the pit? Now we have a halacha, tovet beno. You are not allowed to shecht an animal and its offspring on the same day. Okay, so now if I'm going to go and take the two animals out, clearly I'm taking one of them not for the sake of shechita, so it's not for the sake of Yom Tov. So I have an issue of muktzah again. So what does Rabbi Yeshua say? He says what you can do is the following. You can take out one animal in order to shecht it, and then when that animal's out, you don't shecht it, and you say, oh, I actually want the other one. Okay, and then you can go and take the other one out, and then you can shecht whichever one you want. That's harama. That's harama, but it's allowed. It's allowed. So he says in this case. So he says, says Rashi, Velaskek Rabbi Yoshua. First of all, he says, La'alim. What's the harama over here? He says, Lomar v'adaim sabomum. That reminds me, I'm going to take out the animal. I'm going to say, sure, it's going to have a mum. Before I've checked, sure, it's going to have a mum kavua. Maybe yes, maybe not. Why would we say that you could do that? We would say that you could do that because of the Sunnah Havamina, right? We would say that you could do that because in order to avoid Tsar Balei Chayim, which is an Isur D'Oraita. Therefore, we're going to allow that. So he says, Velaskek Rabbi Yoshua, Da'amah b'perek Meshilin. We're going to see later on the next parak. Oto ve'pnosh naflu labor, an animal and its offspring that fell into a pit. Ma'aleh et al-Rishon, take out the first one. Al manat lishchot, in order to shecht it. Ve'no shochet, and then don't shecht. V'chozer u'ma'aleh et hasheni, and then go back and take out the second one. Right? And now they're both up. I want this one, I can shecht it. I want that one, I can shecht it. Right? Why are we allowing the harama in such a case? We're allowing the harama in such a case because in order to avoid Tsar Ba'alei Chayim. So you would say, if my Mishnah had said that there's discussion between Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon about whether I can go in Mumim B'Yom Tov or not, so then what would I say? I would say, okay, that's a general discussion between them. But if an animal fell into a bore, well, that's something else. Animal fell into a bore, that's something else. I can go and I can take it out and then I can see it in order to, similar to that Mishnah. But we don't teach you that way in order to tell you that that's not the case. Right? So that's exactly the point. Come to teach you that is not. Now, so we're going to ask a follow-up question. If that's correct, okay, if that's correct, what says Rashi? Then if Nefilat bol denakat, that the fact that our Mishnah taught about falling into a bowl is what? Lashmuinan, the lo ya'aleu, in order to teach you that you can't just go and take out any animal from the pit. You have to go and you have to check inside. You have to check first. Nakat lev. That's the case. Then the wording should have been different. It should have said nakat lev im lav lo ya'aleu. Should have said don't bring it up. Obviously, look, if you can't take the animal out of the pit, obviously you can't shecht it, right? Let's see it in the language of the Gemara. It says, Ihachi, if what we just said is correct, lo yishchot, lo ya'alev yishchot mi bayaleh. Right? The lo yishchot over there, that is a quote from the Mishnah. The Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon said, if there's no mum, we haven't checked, lo yishchot. I can't shech the animal. I can't do slaughter it. So, but if the whole point of teaching me that if it goes down into the pit, I can't go and take it out of the pit unless I've had a mumcha who's come and checked it. So then my Mishnah should have said, im lav lo ya'aleh, or lo ya'aleh v'yishchot. It should have said, don't take the animal up, or don't take it up and then shechted. The shechted part is obvious. The whole kiddush is to teach you that you can't take the animal out of the pit. So why does it say lo yishchot? It should say lo ya'aleh v'yishchot. Right? So says the Gemara, no, lo tzricha de aval ve'aske. Why did the Mishnah say lo yishchot? To teach about the case if somebody, nonetheless, in any event, went and took and pulled the animal out. So you might have said, since he's already taken it out, I'm not going to be worried anymore about the muktzah or about anything like that. So we say no. We say still it's not allowed. Says Rashi, lo tzricha de aval ve'aske. Right, it's only teaching me that for the case where you've actually the person's already taken the animal out of the bowl. He says, "Vashmauta." It comes to mashmauta. It comes to teach you as follows: the lo laskemel reishashim. That it comes to teach you that the fact that you took it out in the first place, also that you shouldn't have done. Shma mina diktani yireda mumche v'yil'eh v'lo ktani ya'aleyu v'yil'eh. Right, from the language of the Mishnah itself. What does it say? It says the mumche should go down. It doesn't say you should take the animal and check. It says the mumche should go down and check. And then I can teach you something else. That even if you went down, you went and you transgressed and you took it out, right? In other words, so read the Mishnah like this. Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Yehuda says, Yeled mumche v'yil'eh. The first part is Yeled mumche v'yil'eh, meaning the mumche himself has to go down. You can't take the animal out. He has to go into the pit and he has to check the mum or not. And if there's a mum, then you can take it up and shochet. V'im lav, and if there's not, lo yishchot. So that's now another case. Meaning if there's no mum, even if you had already taken the animal out, which you weren't meant to do in the first place. The mumche was meant to come check it in the boar. But even if you took it out, and now the mumche is looking at it, and he says no, so you might think, I've already taken it out, it's fine. No, I go on to the shchita. Okay, now you'll tell me, none of this makes sense. If there's no mum, so in any case you can't do shchita. Okay, so the continuation of the Gemara will explain that. So says the Gemara now, right? Salkadata chamina leshachte kamashmalan. Right? You would have thought now in such a case, since you've already brought the animal up, even though the mumche doesn't see a mum kavua, so you could still do the shchita. So I can teach you that you can't. And immediately ask the Gemara, I don't understand. Leshachte hatamu. None of this makes sense. The last explanation we just gave. How could you even have a hava mina that you're going to shech the animal if there's no mum? It's a tam. Tam meaning that it's not. There's no mum. So says the Gemara, no. You have to understand. Lo tzricha. You only need it for the following case. Denafal bei muma. Where it actually has a mum. So we say muktzeu, but that would mean then it's still muktzeh. So no. Ela the nafal bei mum over me'elev yom tov. V'hashta avalei mum kavu. The case is as follows. The case is that the animal had a mum over before yom tov. So when I saw there was a mum over, that now the animal has a mum before yom tov, so I have in mind that maybe I'm going to be able to shech this animal. Right, mum over me'elev yom tov. The hashtav a mum kavua. Now on Yom Tov itself, it turns into a mum kavua. All the mum over heels, and it gets another mum over. So then we take us mal detema the date la vevenishkate. But then you would say, since before Yom Tov it's not muktzeh, now it has a mum over. Now it has a mum kavua. Right? I had in mind from before Yom Tov that I might be able to shecht it because of the mum over. So then I would say that I could do the shchita. So Kamashman to say no, that the mumche had a look at that, and once he saw that mum over was not a mum kavua. So then it's gone out of the category of that I'm allowed to go and shecht it, and I would not be able to. So that is the conclusion. At the end of the day, we're talking about a case whereby there was a mum over before Yom Tov, that mum healed, and now there's a new mum kavua, but nonetheless, that does not, so that would not allow one to perform the shchita in such a case. Okay, Ad Kan, I think we'll stop there. It's 9 o'clock, so we'll pick it up next week, B'ezrat Hashem, from the 2 dots. Everybody have a good day. I wish you now Shabbat Shalom, because I won't see you tomorrow.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.